Vamos caminando hacia el sol. Caminando, caminando. Vamos caminando hacia la unidad. This is a song called Caminando, and I introduced this talk for you because it translates to mean when you're doing the work, when you're doing your work in the world, that you're always moving, that you're always walking in the direction of justice, in the direction of freedom, in the direction of liberty, in the direction of self-preservation. Whatever it is that is your work, you're always moving in that direction, and you don't ever get to a place where you stop and you're like, done. Vacation time. You really pursue that mission for your whole walking and waking life. So it's written by a beautiful friend of ours, Francisco Herrera, and some of you might know our work. I tour with Rising Appalachia, and it's a project that started many years ago. And you mostly might know the work from stage, so I want to tell you a little bit about how that project started and how it is really a very big part of this theme of exposure, vulnerability, and being raw, and also the work that we are doing with it now. So Rising Appalachia was started by my sister and I. We grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and we recorded an album in one afternoon in our late teens as a gift for our mother and father to say that the music that they brought into our lives was something that would stay. And they raised us with traditional mountain music, Appalachian folk music, and blues and soul, but we grew up in the proper prime urban South. So we had all of the influences of hip hop and soul and the underground spoken word movement and salsa and bossa nova and all of the world's influences. And we started that project just out of a response to want to say, there is a place for this genre. It doesn't really exist, so we're just going to create it, a genre that makes folk music actually a contemporary music form, a music that takes all of the traditions of music, all of the traditions of storytelling that has come into folkloric traditions, and then it preserves it and uses all of our resources, our young minds and the influences of what musics and what stories are in our heads now. So we started it just literally on our back porches to do that. And each step of the way has been a response to communities asking, inviting us to come in, saying, well, we want to hear a little bit of your story, we want to hear a little bit of the music, will you come and play? So we're about 9 years in, and we're working on the production of our 6th album. And it's no problem for me to sing with a beautiful band behind me in front of 10,000 people, but this is the part that's a little bit more tricky. Trying to figure out how to put into context why we are doing this and how we got here and what it really means. So I want to present to you this relationship that we're developing now with the music industry, which is something that we're calling the slow music movement. Right? So as we've slowly flushed out this idea that we are okay, actually making music, and we're being invited places, we're performing in stages. We started out in backyards and around fire pits. We did busking tours in Europe where we strapped our instruments to our backs and went and played on the streets and met owners of tea houses and met the community members that had a church or a stage, and we would produce entire tours based on interaction and connection each day. We lived in New Orleans for almost 7 years, and each afternoon we would go like our 9 to 5 with our instruments and our hat, and we would sit on the corner, we would meet the post office department workers, and we would meet the people who worked in the office buildings. We would meet the tourists that were coming through to visit. We would have an interaction with everyone. And this is where all of this work started. It came all out of this desire that we could really sustain the idea of the troubadour, the storyteller and the musician that was carrying music and going from town to town to deliver that music, having a relationship with the communities where they were performing and carrying that story, that seed, to the next place that they went. Now, in our 8th, 9th year here, we have this amazing thing called success. And I think we might even call this a career at this point, which is crazy. Because we're like, how did we get into this? But we're touring full time. Based on a very, very rough calculation, have probably spent at least 220,000 miles on the road easily. We go back and forth to places. We are invited to stages from the Orange Peel to the Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And we're trying to figure out how to take that idea of the troubadour back into the traditional music industry world. So we want to really, really establish and fortify that relationship a little differently than what's being done in contemporary music. And the way that I reference it is when you go to the grocery store, if you go to Ingles, you have like regular food section, and then you have like the health food section. And if you're needing to go to the doctor, you can go to Western medicine or you can go to alternative doctors. But if you're working in the music and art industry, you have one way of going, you know? And the way to get up means that you fly across the country for every gig that's there. It means that you have a big tour bus and a whole bunch of hotels, and you're fed catered food. And we're really working hard to create a blueprint that would make an alternative, so that there starts to be a methodology to that starts to say, okay, you want to go this troubadour route. You want to take the slow movement. So we're going to start working on bringing in farm-to-table dinners so that you have a relationship when the performers come in with the farmers and the local community at the venues. We want to have a relationship so that at many of our shows, we open the doors for local nonprofits, so that each town that we arrive in, there's 3 tables, 3 nonprofits are brought in, and they're given tickets to the show for free for them and for 1 volunteer, so that the audience actually comes in and they're engaged in an experience, but then that experience doesn't just end at the end of the show and then kind of go off into the land of nebulousness. That you have a way to have a relationship with the community, the people you're dancing next to and rubbing elbows with. That you have a way to know how to be involved the next day and the next day, and how to stay actually more rooted with the community that you're celebrating with as much as the community that you're working with. We also are in relationship right now with a slow dialogue with Amtrak. We're going to call ourselves Rising Amtrak. Once they sign the dotted line. But we want to do a relationship with Amtrak so that we can start developing an alternative to jet setting, an alternative to being on the road full time in a van and in a bus, and start to investigate train tours where we go onto the rails and we stop in the towns where there's already hubs around the rail stations. And each of those hubs, we go and we do a show, we stay for a few days. We have this relationship with the community, with the educators, with the teachers, with the farmers, and then we go back to the station, hop on and go to the next stop. This is a long work in progress. This last year we did one of our biggest shows. It was at the Fillmore in Colorado, and we pulled in our little tiny rented minivan, which our whole band and all of our gear manages to fit in, only if we Tetris it like this and nobody breathes or moves. And we pulled into the back of the Fillmore, and all the staff came running out, and they were like, "What are you guys, the catering? You've got to go, like the band's coming." You know, they're like, they gotta unload all their buses, and we were like, "It's us. They're the headliners. It's our minivan. We rented it." So, like, there's just this hilarious amount of like non-registering that it can actually be done in a smaller scale way. So that is this vision and this version of what we want to bring into the forefront of the creative mind and of the creative interaction with the public. It is a public service work. being a performer and being a musician and being an artist is something where you bring your stories and your personality into the community. So I put all of that on the table here for all of you and for each of us to figure out how to actually create a space that would sustain this, that would ask for the music and art industry to actually support this so that we have these arts organizations. And this music is an international language. It's one of the few forms of art that actually everyone has a relationship to in some capacity. So creating a space where the slow music movement has the same pillar as the slow food movement, so that you know what you're getting, you know what you're coming to, you know what kind of service is being brought to you, and you know that you're also fortifying the artists that you support and you believe in. So with that, thank you very much.